Good morning. Is it still morning? It is. How are you today?
Great.
I am so very happy to be here. I've been to your community many times through the years, and it is an honor to support the unfoldment of the divine idea that is the Seal Beach Center for Spiritual Living. Absolutely. And of course, I'm grateful to Reverend Josh and his very generous invitations to have me come speak. And I'm delighted to see Reverend Michael in his ministerial role here, and the soon-to-be Reverend Nicole and Rick in their elements as well. And so it's wonderful. I've had good material to work with from your community as dean. So thank you very much. I appreciate that. And the talk for today is Holy Ground. And I'll begin by saying that we're in a time of change. Have you noticed? There's change across the world, shifting international loyalties and various things going on there. There's change in our planet. There's change in our country. You may have change going on in your personal life. And there's change right here at the Seal Beach Center for Spiritual Living. And so the talk today is about how do we find center in the midst of change? How do we find holy ground and find what we're centered in and what we're centered as that allows us to abide in a place of peace while everything around us is swirling? This, by the way, is not a talk about denial. It's not about denying, and it's not political either, so don't worry. It's not about denying feelings or circumstances or situations. It is about finding where we can stand in the midst of all of that is taking place. And so, speaking of change, did I have it right that Reverend Josh and April and Gavin are driving today to Colorado? Yes, okay. So, what's that?
Minus Gavin.
Minus Gavin. Okay. So Reverend Josh and April, and so let's take a moment to bless them on their way. And I know he'll be back for 2 weeks, but if you would just take a moment to close your eyes and place your hand on your heart and take a nice deep breath into your heart center and hold them there. And so let us know that the angels of our highest thoughts, of Reverend Josh's and April's greatest good, go before them to prepare the way and to smooth it and to make it filled with grace and ease and light, so that their journey is easy, that they arrive refreshed, and they're happy to take on this new experience. We know and accept the highest and best for them and bless them on their way. And if emotion comes up for you right now, just feel it. Finding holy ground is absolutely about feeling feelings and just being current. That's one of the healthiest ways to go through change, is to be current with your feelings. And so accepting all of this good, we give thanks. And so it is. So there's an image that I like to use when I contemplate change, and that is of a wheel turning. And actually what change feels like to me very often is a wheel spinning. And I'll share with you that years ago I was in a time of intense change and I started getting dizzy. And I went to get support from, whoever was my woo-woo doctor at the time. And he said, when the wheel of change spins, you don't want to try to grab a hold of it, because if you do, it throws you off. And so when change begins to happen, you want to let the wheel spin, but find center. And so an image that I have of that's actually very kinesthetic for me is of a playground merry-go-round. Have you ever played on one of those as a kid? And I can feel what it feels like to grab the bars and go running in the sand around it and leap on there. And when you're on a merry-go-round, you have a choice to either stand at the edge, at the rim, and lean out, and have the chills and spills of the ride around the edge and almost get thrown off. Centrifugal force does try to throw us off. Or we can move to the center and have a much more peaceful ride. And so I'm here today to support you in moving to center while you go through this mystical process of welcoming in a new minister. There are steps to the process. That's not mystical at all. But it is a mystery how across time and space, a minister is called to you. It's quite remarkable, sort of just like we get married, you know? It's a mystery sometimes, isn't it? Sometimes it's a mystery we think we shouldn't have done. But and so you're beginning to enter into this time. And this is a very good time to decide who you want to be and how you want to be as you go through this time of change. Will you stand in the center, centered in the spiritual truth that you know? Or will you ride the edge of change that can feel chaotic sometimes, the ups and downs, the ins and outs, the judgments and the fears? You know, which will it be? This is a great time to determine how it is that you will be. When we practice coming to center, what we're coming center in is, first of all, the divine reality. This thing that we call God, Spirit, Life, Universe. Do you have another name? Love. This thing that we are centered in and that we're centered as. And when we can become very aware of this center and build our consciousness there, it will support us, whatever is going on, spinning at the edge. So what abides is the divine reality, and the opportunity in finding holy ground is to find that which is changeless in the midst of change. Again, not in denial of feelings or anything else going on, but just being able to come to center. I think that one of the greatest benefits of living the spiritual life is being able to dwell in what abides when change is happening. It's one of the most important powers, I think, that we have. So Michael Beckwith has a wonderful phrase that I like, and he talks about seeing with the eye behind the eyes. It's actually in a song that he did on a trance dance CD. See with the eye behind the eyes, hear with the ear behind the ears, love with the heart behind the heart. And what's being spoken to there is that there is a spiritual dimension in us that is about oneness, that when we see with the eye behind the eyes, we're seeing with the third eye, we're seeing with the unitive eye. And what that, instead of the dualistic one that is caught up in appearances and the light and dark of things and the good and the bad and the yes and the no and who we love and who we judge, you know what I mean, all those things. But when we see with the single eye, what we're seeing is the reality of spirit. We're seeing that all there is spirit and form. There aren't two things, spirit and matter. There's just one thing. Spirit in the invisible, spirit in form. And when we can know that about life, that all there is spirit taking on form and deserting form in this thing that Ernest Holmes calls the play of life upon itself, then we have an opportunity to stay anchored in the spiritual reality instead of getting caught up in the dualistic reality of life. This dimension that I'm speaking about, I think we come to in our best meditation moments. Our very best meditation moments when the mind stills and the thoughts cease and we just come into being. And we begin to be with life and breathe with life and feel the present moment. That is a powerful place to be, and we can build it so strong that it becomes our anchor, our dwelling place, and even our refuge when everything around it is going wild, when the spinning wheel is spinning. We find and develop the ability to come back to center, We have, this is the point, that whatever we anchor in becomes the consciousness that fills us. And the consciousness that fills us shapes our consciousness, our thoughts, and our actions. We have a very basic principle in science of mind. What you give your attention to increases, and you will attract to you what is like your thought. And that should give us caution on a daily basis. Am I really wanting to experience that which I am thinking? It's a good question. But what we anchor in becomes our consciousness, and it fills and shapes our thoughts. And we can anchor in hate, we can anchor in resentment, we can anchor in judgment and regret and fear. Have I left out anything? And many people do. And when we anchor in those things, we will experience the consequences of having those things fill our consciousness. So I love the story of the Buddha's enlightenment. And in the story of the Buddha's enlightenment, Siddhartha, who became the Buddha, was determined to become enlightened. This is after many years of wandering and doing various things. He sat down under the Bo tree or the Bodhi tree with the absolute intention to become enlightened, and which speaks to the power of intention. And so he began to sit and sit and sit, and as the story goes, Mara, the Lord of Darkness and the Lord of Illusion, began to send temptations to him, to distract him from his sitting. And the image that I love of this part of the story actually comes from a movie called Little Buddha. Did any of you see that many, many years ago? And I love this part, and actually Keanu Reeves was playing Siddhartha, so he was much younger and very thin and looking good. And, and in this part of the story, Mara's army sent thousands of arrows flying at Siddhartha. And when the arrows come into the atmosphere of his consciousness, into his bliss, because he was sitting in bliss, they turn into flower petals and they fall helplessly around him. It's very lovely, and it's an image that sticks with me. And the idea here is that whatever we fill our consciousness with, if we are anchoring ourselves in and filling our consciousness with the reality of God, the spiritual reality, life, love, and we're anchored there, then as the various things of life come to us, our atmosphere, our consciousness is going to help change those things. Now, what I know is that not one of us in this room is impervious to the things that happen in life. We have conflicts, we have challenges, we have difficulties, and sometimes we experience terrible loss. So none of this is in denial of that. But when we build center, and when we come to holy ground where we stand, I sometimes call it being firmly planted in midair. Firmly planted in the spiritual reality, regardless of what is going on, our life becomes more transformative. We are actually able to live a spirit-centered life in really beautiful and powerful ways. So I have another story to tell you, and I'll just say, and that you're already hearing it, that I love and I find incredibly useful quotations, images, and stories that call me back to center when I wander. When I forget the holy ground of my being and the holy ground of life, I really appreciate these things that I'm sharing with you today. So I have another story for you. And this comes out of a book called The Mustard Seed, which was one of the very first spiritual books that I came across when I started on the Science of Mind path, written by Osho, also known as Rajneesh. And in this story, Mount Vesuvius, by the way, this is not a literal story, and I'll remind you of that on the other side, too. So Mount Vesuvius is erupting, and Pompeii is being destroyed. The entire city is set on fire. And the people of the city are running. They are terrified. And because the city was so very rich, they have each grabbed up their most valuable and prized possessions, and they're carrying absolutely as much as they can. And so there's one man carrying his gold, and someone else is carrying diamonds, and the scholars are carrying their sacred scriptures and their books. And they are terrified, and buildings are falling, and they feel like life itself is ending, and they are concerned and disturbed. And walking among them is a man, and all he has with him is his walking stick. And he is out for his morning walk because his routine was every morning at 3 a.m. he would go out for his walk, and this was the time. And so as the people see this man walking, they're saying to him, "What, did you lose everything? You're not carrying anything. Have you had total destruction? What's going on? And why are you not rushing along with the rest of us?" And the man said, "I have nothing but this stick." And then he said to them, what you are carrying, what you have accumulated, is everything that is of the world. Fire burns it, death ends it. I have accumulated nothing but awareness. For you, this is a crisis. For me, it's time for my morning walk. Not a literal story. There are many reactions possible to this story. The man's hard-hearted, he doesn't care, he's not compassionate, he's not helping anybody else, he's not responding to the crisis. Well, there may be something in that. But the meaning here is that there is a truth of our life, our centeredness in spirit, that is above and beyond, or inside and behind, wherever you want to place it, whatever it is that is going on. Ernest Holmes has a wonderful quotation that caught my attention very early on. He says, stand in hell and proclaim heaven. Stand in the hell of crisis and difficulty, not denying it, but know a greater truth. Know the heaven of higher consciousness and the fact that holy ground is right under your feet and right in the center of your very own being. And so I want to share with you where I began, which is that you have the power to decide who and how you're going to be as you go through this time of change. We have the power to tune in the frequency that we want to transmit. We have the ability to establish ourselves in a practice of consciousness, and no matter what's happening, we stick with that. Even though we get distracted and pulled off, even though we have mighty feelings that come along with change, we can feel those feelings and honor them in all of the circumstances and situations, and yet we can come back to the center. And I will share with you just a personal experience. My daughter got married recently, and for a mother of the bride, that's a whole big thing. And it was wonderful, and it was beautiful, and it was perfect. And as I contemplated this wedding sometime before it happened, I realized that I was going to be having to navigate some interesting relationships. That happens in weddings. People from the past, other people in their issues with people of the past, and not every relationship resolved. And I just decided that what I would do is set my dials. And so I dialed myself in for love, for cheerfulness, for energy to keep on going no matter what, because it was a marathon experience, for the willingness to navigate, to stay pleasant, to stay present, and to be as open and centered in spirit as I could possibly be. And I emerged from that experience very tired and really satisfied. I was happy with how I was. That is a huge thing, right? It was huge for me. And so whatever is a situation that's up in your life, you have the power to decide how you're going to be. So what can we dial in as frequencies? We have all the qualities of God, and here's a common list: abundance, balance, beauty, freedom, joy, love, order, peace, power, unity, wholeness, wisdom. And no matter, the qualities of God are already the essence and truth of who and what we are. They are unconditional. The only question is, will we practice them? You can practice beauty on the day that you feel you're most unlovely. You can practice the consciousness and the centeredness of abundance even when your finances are a mess. You can practice the freedom of your being even when you feel trapped in a situation. I think you get the idea. We have the power to dial it in and choose how we will be, and then do our best to practice what it is that we would like to practice. It is the practice that lays the experience of holy ground right under our feet. There are 3 words that I've been thinking a lot about recently in terms of practices, because they seem in short supply these days in the midst of all the change. And they are loving kindness, compassion, and mercy. So loving kindness, I think we have a sense of that. We mix our love and our desire to be kind to people in our action. We know what that is. Compassion is a beautiful word. I was listening to the short 7-minute tape of Brene Brown speaking on compassion. It's on Sounds True if you want to track it down or contact me. And she said compassion, she was actually quoting Pema Chodron. She said compassion is so knowing and understanding the darkness within yourself that you can sit in the dark with someone else. Compassion is our willingness to care about what someone else is going through. Not to deny it and not try to fix it, but just to be there in love and support. And mercy, I find really an interesting word. Mercy is about softening ever so slightly so that we stop, so that we don't condemn somebody, even if their behavior deserves it. Because if we go there, we're being just like them. Loving kindness, compassion, mercy. And so I'll say to you again that you have the opportunity now to decide how you want to be as you go through this time of change. By the way, you are a prized pulpit. I'll put it that way. Already, I am sure that available ministers are thinking about you and preparing to candidate as soon as you are ready. I encourage you to not rush the process. And I know that sometimes in change, we just want to get it over with. There is a mystery here to the unfoldment. Someone gets called across time and space to come here and be with you and to stand on this incredibly sound, beautiful platform that Reverend Josh has created with all of you, and then to take this community to the next level. It will happen. You have fantastic leadership here with Reverend Michael, with Nicole, with Rick, with all of the other leaders, the practitioners here. You are set up to win. And so if you ever forget that for a moment, just hear me saying that to you. It's going to be okay. It's going to be really, really good. As a matter of fact, that's what I know, and that's what I accept. Yeah. Thank you. And God and I are always right. And so I invite you to close your eyes and turn within and just take a nice deep breath. And as you breathe into your heart center, just take a moment to feel your feet on the floor and your body in the chair. And breathe. And direct your breath into your heart center and just meet the inner knower there. That divine reality that is God in you, that is love intelligence that sees and knows. And if there is any issue or situation in your life that seems troubling, where you have more questions than you have answers, if you're feeling the spinning wheel of change somewhere in your life and you're just not quite sure what to do about it, here's a little reading for you. It's from Rainer Maria Rilke. It's called Letters to a Young Poet. Have patience with everything unresolved in your heart and try to love the questions themselves. Don't search for the answers which could not be given to you now, because you would not be able to live them. And the point is to live everything. Live the questions now. And then someday, in the future, you will gradually, without even noticing it, live your way into the answer. And so I take a moment just to give thanks for the opportunity to be here today. And what I know about everyone in this room is that we are a group of light workers here. And that as workers in the light and workers in the spiritual principles of truth, I know that we have a role to play, particularly in a time of change. To allow ourselves to be firmly planted in midair, to know that even though the circumstances and situations are shifting, where we stand is holy ground. in the divine reality that we live in and that lives in and as us. And so we stand on this holy ground in the divinity of our being, choosing to practice the very best that we have in us, staying present, staying open, feeling our feelings, telling the truth, but knowing absolutely all there is the unfoldment of a great good. And so in this, we keep on keeping on unconditionally, centered, strong, clear, compassionate, merciful, allowing ourselves individually and collectively to be the place where heaven is revealed. And so I give thanks for this. I accept this as already so. And with loving thanks, I release this word, and together we say, and so it is.